Piracy has been a problem for a very long time. Today, there are several piracy hotspots throughout the world, such as the Indian Ocean, East Africa, and the Far East, including the South China Sea, South America, and the Caribbean. Pirates have been found to be very active in the waters between the Red Sea, particularly in the Gulf of Aden, and the Indian Ocean, as well as off the Somali coast and in the Strait of Malacca, with the last couple of years seeing a rise in incidents in the Gulf of Mexico. But why is piracy taking place here and not anywhere else? Tactics is today talking with Dr Fotios Moustakis, Associate Professor of Strategic Studies and Director of Dartmouth Centre for Sea Power and Strategy at the University of Plymouth. He will be able to answer those questions for us. Dr Moustakis, good day to you.
Good day, Elaine. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. So the first question really is there a relationship between land and sea as far as piracy is concerned? To put it in a different way, why does piracy take place in some regions and not in others?
Well, the truth is that piracy is a symptom of the breakdown of the country's political system. So there is a direct link between piracy, of course, and the political situation in the country.
Mm-hmm. When you say there is a direct link, could you give us an example of some regions?
Yes, if I may, I can basically, give the example, of course, of the maritime piracy that we encountered around 2000 in the Gulf of Aden and the Horn of Africa. Mm-hmm. Although the piracy attacks declined in the 18th to 20th century, a new surge began around 2000 in the Horn of Africa. And that main reason was the lack of central government in Somalia, which was not able to control the Somali territorial waters. Mm-hmm. The same kind of situation we are also witnessing in, of course, West Africa, in the Gulf of Guinea, with a similar problem, which I can argue that is primarily a Nigerian problem.
Mm-hmm. You talk about the Gulf of Guinea. I mean, there is political instability and terrorist threats in West Africa and the Sahel, and these are exacerbating the problems. So is it maritime terrorism or is it piracy? What's the difference?
Well, it is an interesting question. First of all, in order to characterize some kind of an attack as a maritime terrorism, you must have political objectives. Terrorism is always about political aims or political objectives. Well, of course, piracy is about financial gains and incentives. So I think that is the most important difference between maritime terrorism and piracy. Mm-hmm. So what witness, for example, in Nigeria, it's not a maritime kind of terrorism, it's purely a piracy. And the problem has been exacerbated, especially the maritime piracy incidents in Nigeria in the last 2-3 years, as a result, I would say, of we government embroiling political violence, widespread economic hardship, and easy access to weapons. So the Nigerian government is facing a number of difficulties, especially with engaged with a jihadist kind of warfare against Boko Haram in the Borno state, as well, of course, other issues, which, for example, the kind of banditry in the west part of the country, or the fights between the herdsmen and the farmers. So these are significant problems that the government is facing. And as a result, of course, that has this kind of dedication and focus of the government has exacerbated the problem, of course, in the maritime domain outside the territory.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before that piracy in the Horn of Africa has seen a decline. Why exactly is that?
Well, in the Horn of Africa, that is very interesting because if you think about it, in beginning 2008, the Great Gulf of Aden area of the coast of East Africa and the Horn of Africa became the most dangerous waters in the world for pirate attacks. When we had man armed with machine guns and small boats would target, vessels. And a lot of people estimated that, especially World Bank study estimated that the cost of maritime piracy in Somalia was for the world economy was about $18 billion. So what happened? What actually was the reason? Why, for example, how did we manage to address this issue? Well, let's face it. It took 3 international naval efforts: Operation Atalanta, Operation Ocean Shield, and Combined Task Force 151. It took also effort from the industry-wide efforts to make the vessels harder to attack and easier to defend, as well as, and this is very, very important, we had, of course, improved local government on land with enhanced security and education services. All of this contributed to the demise of kind of maritime piracy attacks and hijackings in the Great Gulf of Guinea. As a result, by 2019, the International Maritime Bureau reported no successful hijackings in that region.
Mm-hmm. Where would you say that there are the most piracy incidents in the world?
Well, at the moment, the Piracy Reporting Center recorded 21 attacks in the Gulf of Guinea in the first quarter of 2020. And of these, I think 12 were on vessels underway at an average of 70 nautical miles of the coast. And we know that the perpetrators are usually armed. They approach in speedboats, boarding ships, in order to steal, the cargo and abduct crew members, demand a ransom. So it is the Gulf of Guinea. The region accounts for 86% of crew taken hostage and nearly 82% of crew kidnappings globally. So in 2020, the Gulf of Guinea has become the world's piracy hotspot.
It's interesting that you mentioned 2020, because in 2020, we've also had the coronavirus pandemic, which is still affecting our everyday lives. So what kind of effect has COVID-19 had on piracy?
Well, it's still early to say. However, research has shown us that people turn to piracy when economic opportunities elsewhere are scarce. Let's face it, piracy, it is potentially a lucrative profession, and states and companies most of the times pay ransoms set by pirates without much fuss, I would say, since the insurance, covers the cost of doing so. So we do expect that the impact of COVID-19 will have significant, I would say, will have significant impact on the way, on the maritime piracy incidents. In my opinions, you will see at the end of this coronavirus crisis and pandemic, shipping companies most likely will cut down on crews and safety measures to save on costs, because at the times of this kind of economic hardship, making them more vulnerable to piracy and also armed robbery at sea. It is also possible that rebel groups, like the ones we've seen, of course, in the Nigeria Delta, or terrorist outfits, might turn to piracy as a main revenue stream. And that is actually a dangerous kind of possibility. And I think we need to take some kind of action. But also, most importantly, the region's governments, like, for example, Nigeria, will almost certainly shift the public kind of safety efforts away from sea piracy and towards more immediate concern on land. And of course, that, as inevitably, will create opportunities for pirates.
Dr. Moustakis, thank you very much for taking the time today.
You're most welcome.